Another good part of the conversation here is for the junior and middle management people, right? If you want that responsibility, you've also got to show that you are someone they can trust. Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Trust the Process podcast, where we dive into business, leadership, and everything in between. I'm excited for our guest today. Scott Hannes is a seasoned HR executive and business leader with more than 20 years of experience helping organizations align their people strategies with business goals to drive sustainable growth. As co-founder of Fortitude HR Solutions, Scott partners with business owners and executive leaders across the United States to design effective HR structures, recruit top talent, and implement strategic initiatives that deliver both immediate results and long-term success. Scott is a mentor and speaker where he regularly teaches on leadership, team development, and strategic business growth. Scott, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. And that is a long-winded bio. Sorry about that.
All good, all good. You'd be surprised a lot longer ones I get. So that was all good, all good. All right. So you've been in the HR space for 20 years. You and I have crossed paths over the years through connections that we kind of have in common, I'd say, with some masterminds and some leaders in the real estate and other industries. But go a little deeper about what it is that you do, and actually maybe I'll switch the question up here. What is probably one of the biggest problems you see time and time again with your clients?
Well, emotional leadership. People typically just don't get that they need to remove the emotion, stick to the data and facts, and really take a step back and make the right decision strategically. I'm seeing that as a common theme lately, and I don't know if it's all the AI stuff and people want instant, quick results, or if it's the lack of formal leadership training and they just don't know any better. Because entrepreneurs doesn't mean you're a good leader, right? So if you don't have the training, it's hard to do that. And unfortunately, I see a lot of that going on right now.
So where do you strike the balance, right, between being an empathetic leader who cares about your team, cares about the mission vision of your organization, whatever it may be, with separating that from the emotions of everything? Because I would say, like, back at my career as head of operations, I often was the head of HR because we wasn't working with big enough organizations to have an HR department. And I would say one of my skill sets was being able to be practical, logical, data driven, while also being caring and empathetic. But sometimes that caring and empathetic means you still have to make tough decisions that hurt people, right? Like,
That's right.
no one wants to be fired, right? So where do we draw that balance?
Yeah, I've got this line that I use. You can borrow or talk. Anybody can use it, but like people either live up or live down to expectations. But if we don't clearly communicate them, what those things are, to our team members, we need to look in the mirror, right? I think that's a real critical thing. It's all about communication and setting the proper expectations. And a lot of people don't do like simple follow-up meetings one-on-one. Like, how are you doing? What can I do to help you? How are you tracking towards your goals and your objectives? How are you doing with your KPIs, the key performance indicators? And that way you can have the factual conversations versus the excuses. And so I think there is a balance between those, but it really comes down to, how you lead, how you communicate, and really, again, how do you set those expectations? So you don't need to be yelling and screaming. And you got to meet people where they're at. And you know that, John, in your leadership journey. Meet people where they're at. People have different life experiences, different generations in the workplace. So what drives one person is not going to drive the other. And that's why I like the more formal one-on-one meetings where I like to do them once a month minimum, if not bi-weekly. So you get to know the person, because people say don't bring in the problems to the workplace. Everybody does, right? Because we're humans. And this is why everybody loves AI, which I can go off on a tangent about AI. But it's so important that we get to know the team and what motivates them, how they like to learn, how they like to communicate, what's going to help them get out of bed every morning to drive them for success.
Yeah, that's what I talk about. When I talk about curious culture, it's always about knowing your staff and knowing what winds their clock, right? What makes them excited coming working today. And again, sometimes today I feel like that's seen as, Gen Z doesn't want to work. They just want to do what they want to do and make it a generational thing. And people are just lazy today. I mean, Napoleon Hill was talking about this back in the 19 teens and 20s about getting to know your staff. Because if you have staff, they're doing 95% of what they love to get a paycheck versus 95% what they hate to get a paycheck. Who's going to show up better for your customers, your clients, right? They're going to show up different every single day.
Yep. 100% agree. And the more that we as leaders can do that and really get to know our teams, that's when they run through the walls with you, and if not for you, when you have that strong relationship. I'm not saying go out to the bars with them and those kind of things. Like there's a fine line there,
Right,
but
right.
really get to know them and find out like what are their we just did an exit interview with a client for one of the like high performing team members that's leaving. Not once did this client ask them where they wanted to be in the next 1 to 3 years. And it's part of our typical self evaluation. It's part of the annual performance review. And they just skip this step because they're like, oh, this person's fine. You can't assume, right? You know what happens when you assume? It's a bad thing.
Yeah, yeah. I once was working at an organization, and I just felt that this manager, this mid-level manager, was just not managing her team well, and there was a team member that I thought was not being utilized properly.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to the manager about it, and unfortunately, by the time I got to around where I was diving in deep with this employee that I thought was being underutilized, she was giving her resignation, and she literally said on her exit interview, I'm busy maybe 2 or 3 months out of the year. The rest of the time I have to find things to do. And this
Mm-hmm.
was an organization that was struggling, right? And just because this manager just thought she knew what was going on with her team and wasn't checking in and utilizing the strengths properly. Another quick thing about getting to know your team. Uh, I'm not going to mention the person's name, obviously, here, but a friend of mine lost his mom in the last year, and it started suffering at work. And talking about getting to know your team, his manager finally pulled him aside and said, "Hey, look, like you're kind of fucking up, right? Like I know you got a lot going on. Like, where are you? Where's your headspace?" And really, all it took was that leader to care,
Mm-hmm.
to show that they noticed that there was an issue, and to help him turn it around, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
he just was in a bad space. He, obviously, using that kind of loss, it was a sudden situation. It started affecting his work, and he didn't see it. But
Right.
because the supervisor was engaged and knew him from a
Mm-hmm.
personal level, again, not going at the bars, but like knowing, that he had lost his mom, obviously, and going through that, it made a huge difference in helping him see he needed to make some changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you just show a little bit of empathy, a little bit of caring, like please and thank you are dead words sometimes with a lot of leaders, and showing that compassion like goes a long way.
Yeah, yeah. So how much? So I agree wholeheartedly with everything you're talking about with checking with teams, getting to know your teams, finding what winds their clock. Uh, how much do you think for organizations that want to innovate, grow, and change is also bringing into um, tapping into the perspectives of the team, right? I think that's often a thing that is missed. Is we have our check-ins, and it's always like, how are you doing? Where are you in your KPIs? We don't take the those opportunities to step aside and say, what are you seeing that's wrong?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do to make your job better? What can we do to make the organization better? How do you bring that into the conversation as well?
Yeah, and to me, just asking the direct conversation, like what are the pain points? How can we help you perform your job better? What are you seeing as opportunities? And I think that comes with the leader empowering the team member, right? To come up with solutions, to come up with ideas. I had a former mentor and boss of mine. His name was Kevin. Kevin's like, Scott, don't throw up on my desk. Bring me the three solutions to every problem. He's like, I don't want to see the labor pains. Just show me the baby. And
Yeah.
so he empowered me to go out and do my job and bring solutions. And I've learned that from him, and I instill that everybody I work with. It's how do we get better, 1% better each day? Like
Right.
people when they say this is the way we've always done it, that's the wrong mentality, right? It goes back to change management. It goes back to continuous improvement. Like and taking that mindset and applying that to our teams and empowering them. It's okay if you fail. I think that's like a failure is a negative word, but what do you learn from the failure? How can we grow from it? Like that's important when you look at growth and strategic initiatives in the organization.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. The mastermind I was in a couple weeks ago in California, uh, one of the participants was talking about a problem they had where like she's got like, I think 60 people on her team, everyone remote, and she's like,
Mhm.
I can't be here at this conference, this meeting, without being hit with 300 questions, and everyone's trying to give her advice and everything. And I said, well, I raised my hand. I said, well, when you're not on this trip, and your staff comes to you with a problem, do you solve it for them? She's like, of course I do. Well, that's why they keep coming to you.
Yep.
You've shown them time and time again that you are the one who has to solve the problem and have the answers. If
Yep.
you start switching that around and encouraging them, bring the solutions. I totally agree with you. Like, bring the three possibilities. Let's talk it through. Let's have you make the decision on which direction to go. If you start empowering them on those one-on-one conversations when you have the time, they're going to come to you a lot less. And you can
Yep.
also say, hey, look, I'm going away. Unless there's an emergency, I want you to take care of it. Just send me a report afterwards, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
I'm a trust but verify person.
Yep.
But like too many leaders aren't doing that because, like you said, I think it's they want the quick answer and they think they're the quickest way to get the answer.
Yep. Yeah. And there's a great line that goes with it. And I don't know who said it, but I like to use it a lot. But what you permit as a leader is what you promote. So if you're the one that's giving them all the solutions, you're permitting that, and so you're telling everybody else on the team, "Come to me. I'm the person that's going to fix everything," versus empowering them and letting them do things on their own. I like what you said, John, too, about coming back and having them report out how did it go and what can we have done better. What did you learn from it? Like those are good learning lessons. If you invest in your people, typically you have your highest return on investment in the organization. Marketing's the second biggest investment.
So let's switch gears a little bit to strategy because that's something like my consulting firm does. And as I've grown in my career and looked at things differently, I began with launching operations, the internal operations, finance administration, grew to cross departmental COO roles, and now as a consultant, what we do is focus on um, helping people diagnose where they are
Mm-hmm.
from an operational leadership and culture standpoint to help them get where they're going. And what I've seen is, writing the book, The Curious Leader, et cetera, is that the intersection of culture, leadership, and operations, where those three align properly, is where real innovation, growth, and change happens.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we, when you're working with the clients on strategy, how do you make sure that the initiatives that are coming out of strategy sessions are aligned with the capabilities of the leadership, operation, and culture?
Yeah, so I think you have to, and I don't know how many companies do this effectively, but understanding your team and the strengths, whether it's the gap, the gain, understanding where they're able to perform, whether or not. Do we have succession planning in place? Have we identified our high potentials? Are we doing organizational development where we've got a high potential and we're giving them the tools and the resources for them to be able to go up and move to the next level? What are those milestones? What's their career learning path and like that curve of training trajectory? That's usually not done. I think when that happens, then you can see where the gaps are from the strategic plan. Do we have it on the team internally, or do we need to go out and find that external talent? Because sometimes that's the case. And then is everybody aligned, and are we all in the boat rowing in the same direction? There's a lot of times strategic initiatives are done. We do a lot of like strategic planning with clients, and you've got different leaders, you have different owners sometimes in the room, and not everybody's aligned. So guess what happens? It's constant butting heads and conflict, and then we're wondering why we didn't hit our goals. So until that happens and everybody trusts everybody and we know that we've got the right people in the right seats, as Jim Collins talks about, it's really hard to be able to go out and execute. So the trust, I think the development of the team, I think making sure that, again, everybody knows where their strengths are and their areas for improvement. I think like teaching or understanding emotional intelligence is a lost skill for a lot of leaders, understanding where their gaps are. And then again, what can they do to improve? And if they've got all those things in place, I think that's where culture improves. I think that's where collaboration takes place. I think that's where you see results because you have the initiative, because everybody's in the boat rowing in the same direction instead of having the constant conflict where they're fighting each other, different ideas. I want to do this marketing strategy. You want to do this. Well, paid Facebook ads are the way to go versus SEO versus, hey, we're a B2B company. It's all about relationships.
Right.
So you have to like figure out what the marketing goal is and then go out and attack. You can't have three different things. Not saying you can't try all three, but which one, you have to look at past results and see what's been effective and then put more effort into those things.
So one thing I've really seen, and this is really comes from my earlier days in the association world, nonprofit world, is I think there's often a lot of disconnect for the people who are creating the strategies,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the nonprofits where it's it's time for our 5-year strategic planning process, and it's the same people around the same table have the same conversation, and whatever comes out of that board meeting, which is usually just the board with the chief staff executive, as they often call it in the nonprofit world, the executive director, the CEO, nothing gets implemented because it's all people up here who have no idea the operational capabilities. They don't know the staff. They don't know who's in what roles. They don't know any of this. And so it happens up top, gets stuck in the middle with the chief staff executive because it's not implementable. Like they just there's nowhere to go with it. How do you balance being the leaders, being the manager who are responsible for the strategy, but bringing in the right people to truly know what you're capable from a strategic and operational stance?
Yeah, I think there's a two-part answer to that, John. I think you have to do the skills assessment of each team member. So whether it's the review process or again, where they're strong, where they need to improve, the succession planning, the high potentials. But then is that strategic plan communicated effectively to everybody else on the team? Are there goals, whether you use SMART goals or PPOs, personal performance objectives, or use, OKRs, rocks, whatever thing you want to use, are those clearly cascaded down to everybody else on the team? Again, it's great if the team's got the vision, from the board and the CEO. That's great. But how do we integrate that, and how do we use the current team that we have, or who do we need to add to the team or to supplement the team to get out and be able to execute? And I don't know your thoughts. I'm a little bit jaded from COVID, John. And so like 5-10 year like strategy sessions to me is a little bit outdated. I think like 3 years is probably more realistic these days because so much changes. I mean, AI changes every 2 minutes. So again, like how we're doing one thing may be able to be improved or changed upon, but it's again setting that clear direction and then having somebody that knows how to relate that and communicate that on the level everybody understands. If you use all these big fancy words and we keep it really over complex, which a lot of I work with some nonprofit schools and churches, they do that. They're like, oh, we're going to do all these grandiose things, but then they don't communicate it and nobody understands it, or they use big words. They're not keeping it simple, stupid, the KISS method, and then people don't know what to do. So again, it's making sure that we all align. Do we understand? Are we agreed? Can we all, like my old boss, Jim, would say, Scott, we sign up for our goals in blood. Well, this was at a PE firm, so it's a little bit harsh, but you either hit your goals or you don't work there. It's that simple. Now, you don't want to put that culture in a lot of organizations, but the point was very valid in the fact that we had to know what we were doing. We signed off on them. So like we had ownership responsibility, and then we had to go execute. So I think that's where the disconnect, I think, comes a lot of times is we have these grandiose plans, but people don't know how to interpret them because they've not been clearly communicated. So how are we rolling that out? How are we implementing it? And then how are we cascading that down to everybody else on the team? And, in Traction, I'm sure you've read that book or heard of it, Gino Wickman with EOS. But with that, like they do have the people analyzer, which I think is a pretty decent tool. Like, does the person get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? And again, that's subject to interpretation as well. But what can you objectively look at from a performance standpoint, and where can you see where the gaps are?
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, I've seen this both in for-profit, nonprofit. Again, I think the nonprofit world is probably a little more rigid and structured in how they do these, 3, 5, 10 year strategic plans process. But like, I agree with you. They become such because they happen in this regimented way. They become such these big plans. We're going to launch into this new endeavor. We're gonna do all these big things, and then 6 months into that, they're nowhere near the direction they want to head, see something's not possible, and the whole thing goes out the window, right? As opposed to having a vision. This is where we want to go. Like that's how I look at it, right? Like instead of a strategy towards the vision, like let's figure out where we want to go. We want to grow, we want to add more members, we want to do more conferences, whatever it may be. Let's have that vision. Okay. Now what do we do weekly, monthly, annually to get there? The baby steps. We look at strategic planning and growth and innovation as, Amazon creating, robots for supply chain. When really Bezos says the biggest benefit that was ever given to Amazon in the early days when they were packing boxes on the ground, when it was working out of his garage, was someone recommending a sorting table. Right. The greatest advice ever given to help Amazon move forward was a sorting table. Not robots, not spaceships, not anything, not AWS. It was a sorting table, and they tripled their production overnight because of one little suggestion. And I think so often we miss those little, just moving the needle little by little. How do we change this? How do we tweak this? How do we get 5 hours back from our time by making something efficient? How do we, just tweak a communication strategy a little bit? No new technology, no adoption of another platform, but how do we just tweak things a little bit to get better results?
Yeah, and I wish more organizations, like what you said, if it doesn't work after 6 months, everybody comes back to the table and you reset the expectation. You figure out what's working, what's not working. Are you evaluating that on a quarterly basis to see, are we hitting the target? Are we on target? Are we off? And then even like what you said with like the sorting table with Amazon and that example, like getting feedback, because again, the people that do the job every day, they're going to know where there's time efficiencies. I come from a manufacturing background as well, John. So I'm used to like Kaizen and Lean and Six Sigma. Continuous improvement was like drilled into me. So, we used to have at the one company I worked at tape on our desk of where like the laptop would be, and it was marked out and said laptop. We had the stapler, it was labeled stapler. And then the CI teams, the continuous improvement teams, will come and walk around different offices and desks and workspaces and see where there's inefficiency. So it's made me very cognizant of some of those things. And again, those little examples can be huge for productivity. They can be huge for like just changing culture, all those things. But it allows people to be empowered to be able to say something. If they see something, they say something, and then you can act on it. But you got to be a good listener. I've got these two big ears that stick out, right? So I need to be able to listen effectively, not to respond, but listen to understand and figure out what they're really saying and what makes sense. And then we're not going to implement everything that somebody says. But again, if we can come up, we did a continuous improvement bonus for our team members and gave them an opportunity. If we help save X number of dollars, they got paid a bonus on it. So it incentivized everybody from the janitor in the building all the way up to the executive team, although some of the executives were exempt from it, to make those continuous improvement suggestions. So it's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've all been in a situation where, the CEO, the owner comes into a room and they're so excited and proud of themselves. They discovered a problem that exists in the company, and they go to the person who oversees, tactically does that task. Mm-hmm. And they say, hey, I discovered this problem. And the employee says, I know, I've known for 6 months. Yep. And what always happens, the CEO, the manager gets mad at the employee for not speaking up. Yep. We need to be looking at why am I not creating the atmosphere mm-hmm. and the dialogue sessions, mm-hmm. those weekly, monthly sessions, to where I'm opening this up to where I learn this a lot quicker. If I could have solved this problem 6 months earlier because I was having that dialogue with my staff member versus, them feeling like they can't because the boss has all the answers, the boss solves all the problems, the stuff we're talking about earlier. And if we just learn, like you said, learn to listen, learn to be curious, learn to pretend that we don't know everything, because here's the thing for leaders, like you shouldn't know everything going on in your company. No. You should not know the ins and outs of every single thing someone's doing. And if you do know everything, you're too much in the weeds. If you mm-hmm. think you know everything, you're wrong, right? And so, like, how do we balance that? How do we stay up as a leader, trust our team, and make sure things are getting done? I've kind of learned that even though I'm focused on operations, I become much more of a leadership coach in helping founders and CEOs learning to let go of their ego, let go of control, let go of all these things. How do you get through to your founders and CEOs and executives when this is in place?
Yeah, I think it's an ever mounting task that happens. First of all, they got to be okay with who they're giving the task to. They got to be able to delegate effectively. They have to know. I would say, and I don't know about you, John, but I'm part of the bottleneck in our operations, right? Like, again, it's funny. Like, we talk about this stuff, and I'm the shoemaker with holes in their shoe, right? Because you know what you want it to look like. But again, it's delegation. I think we used to do this in the corporate world. We would have like town hall meetings once a month where, we also would have people from the corporate offices in Germany or India come in, and they would do like lunch and learns and let people come in and have lunch with the CEO. We would just ask random people. So it was just randomly picked. So we got different feedback points that way. We also, during the town hall meetings, we would do a safety presentation. We talk about our core values. Then we would get into like open dialogue on what questions do you have. We were a very transparent organization, the one organization. So we shared all our financials. How do we do this month versus the previous month? How are we on track for our budget? So we gave all that data, which made it a really good culture that people knew that we were taking care of them. We showed them appreciation. We did little things like that helped us move the needle. But in order for really the leader to be able to like let go, we talk about this in some of these mastermind groups that we're both part of, John, or around, kind of the stress test, like you used with the example with the 60-person, team. Can they go away for a week or 2 weeks or a month, and does the business run without them? And if it doesn't, okay, who do we need to hire? Who do we need to promote? Who do we need to empower to take some of those things off our plate? I like to look at time as like, currency and dollars, right? So, is it a $10 item, a $100 item, or a $1,000 item? And I don't know about you, if I did, and I try to do a time audit, once a year on myself, where are areas for improvement. And I have my clients do this as well. And it's interesting. I'll have a CEO or a founder that's, booking their own travel, and they're not having their assistant do it because they don't think that they can, get the seat that they want or the airline that they want or the flight time. Well, you got to train that, right? And if you train it, then you can delegate it properly. You got to make sure the person has the skill set to do it. You got to make sure that you communicate the information, provide them with training, and then to your point, trust and verify. Let them go book the airline ticket. If they book it on American and you only like to fly Delta, then have that conversation. Those kind of things are important, but you have to let them fail. So I think that's part of the issue, that again, people want all the control. And again, that's going to limit your growth. That's going to limit your ability to lead effectively because everybody's coming to you and you're trying to do everything and you can't do that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I think another good part of the conversation here is for the junior and middle management people, right? If you want that responsibility, you've also got to show that you are someone they can trust, right? It is a two-way street. I mean, I think there is a big problem with in organizations where people are being hired and the managers, the boss is saying, okay, you're hired. Now prove to me you can do the job. Right. No, the minute you hired them, you should trust them, right? Until they prove you otherwise, right? Like I think of, I don't know, remember saw the movie Dangerous Minds from the 90s, inner city school, right? Mm-hmm. When the teacher gave them all A's to start with. Mm-hmm. And it blew their mind. They had never had an A before. Yeah. And it changed their mindset of what was possible. I think that's how we have to look at our people we're hiring, is saying, look, we believe in you. We trust you. Like here are the parameters you have to work in, and we're going to trust you to go do it. Let me know if there's a problem. And I think my career excelled early on is that my bosses always gave me the long leash to do what I wanted and play and explore and experiment, and innovate. But they also knew the minute there was a problem, I would come to them. They wouldn't have to find it out.
Yep. Yeah. And so again, it's a two-way street, like you said. And I think a lot of people sometimes are afraid to speak up, whether it's they don't trust their boss or their manager, or they don't trust the process, or they're afraid of retaliation. So some of that's on the leader, some of that's on the person, but being able to, like you said, create those opportunities where, whether it's an open door policy, those kind of things where they feel comfortable that they can come to you. Are you approachable, or are you standoffish? And are you like, there's a lot of leaders too, John, that are not present. They don't have presence-based leadership. They're on their phones while they're in meetings. They're on their laptop. They're not really paying attention fully. So then, are they going to take me seriously when I come to them? Or are they going to be thinking about 12 other things?
Yeah, 100%. I always think about, the picture of the corner office where the doors always shut, right? Yep. And then you get mad when the employee, the accounting person, doesn't bring the problem that they found 6 months ago that you're just now discovering. They're like, why didn't you tell me? You're not approachable. Yep. What I talk about in my book and in my keynotes is Google's Project Aristotle, where it was the goal was to help Google define what made one team successful versus another. It's an internal project. What they came back with psychological safety, the notion that you have to make people feel safe to speak up, speak out, like we were talking earlier, and that is absolutely on the leadership. Yes, there is an ownership part with the staff and the people to do their part in this, but it all starts with culture. And I think today culture has been seen as a negative because of politics, societal issues. I blame Silicon Valley with hoodies, fruit carts, and ping pong tables, right? That's what people think of when they think of culture today. But when you and I are talking about culture, we're talking about the management, the activities, the tone, all the spoken and unspoken things that dictate how we operate on a daily basis.
Yep. And you don't see enough of that. Like, to me, again, your culture, your mission, vision, values, that's the foundation of every business, right? Whether you're a nonprofit, for-profit, when that's cracked or it's not running smooth, that's when things tumble. That's when there's chaos that ensues because people don't know what it is. So, making sure that people know that, and like DuPont, one of the, the safety company, like chemical organization, they start meetings with safety tips. They start meetings with their, mission, vision, values. Some of my clients, I've instilled that in them, so they're doing that. So again, it's making sure that you're talking about it all the time. And it can't just be lip service. You have to live it out. They've got to be breathable, actionable things. Whether you're the janitor or you're the CEO, you should know what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I worked at a number of organizations where, integrity was, one of their core values.
Hmm.
And the minute like someone points out like this is like we're making people upset or whatever, some a marketing, it's usually over marketing, right?
Yep.
And someone bring up like people don't like this. This doesn't feel good. It's icky. It feels unethical. And the person's response is always, but it works.
Yeah.
So do you really believe in integrity, or do you just believe in what works, right? I'm a big believer in, you know, values have to be more than words on a wall.
Hmm.
And I think your suggestions of starting your meetings with that, reminding people of that, is a great way to make sure it's not just writing on a wall.
Yeah, and you got to constantly live it out, right? And you got to be okay because we're human beings, John. We're going to make mistakes. So when you make a mistake, even as a leader, you got to admit it and say, "I'm sorry," and I screwed up. And then you got to realize maybe you lost some trust with some of the team members, right? And how do you earn that back? I got a great story. I did a keynote. I did 4 keynotes at this conference I was at for a client with 80 employees. Somebody else was speaking, John, and I was in the back of the room and I was on my laptop and I was preparing one of the presentations and I was clicking. And one of the tables goes, shh. And I'm like, uh-oh. So then I realized like, I shouldn't have been multitasking during the other person's keynote. So I apologized to the speaker after they were done. I apologized to the table. And then when I got up to speak, I went up there and said, you know what? I got something I have to admit. I screwed up. I'm sorry. I've learned from it. This was back in May, I think 10th of 2025. I've not done it since. Right. So like, don't be so busy. Again, there was some last minute changes, whatever, but I should have stepped out of the room and not been present in the room. So I wouldn't have been potentially distracting to anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. Like we all are human, and
Yep.
that's something, you know, so much we talk about leadership in business like correlates to other aspects of life, right?
Yep.
I with my so, we grew up in the 80s,
Yep.
90s, and parentings were, because I said so, right? Like that's how we did things. I don't want to do this, but you're making me because you
Mhm.
kids are so bad. I have to punish you. Um, like as an entrepreneur, you are as well. It's a tough balance with kids in life and work, and I was finding myself constantly being short with my son during
Mhm.
a kind of a lull in the business where I'm not working 14 hours a day, is trying to get money coming in, and he comes to me with a homework problem, and I snap at him.
Mhm.
Well, I go and I apologize to him. I was
Mhm.
he probably could have handled things a little different, got my attention a little different way, of course,
Right.
but I'm responsible for my blow up. And
Yep.
I go in there and I remind him every single day, we cannot teach our kids to be responsible for their own actions if we're not willing to be. And the
Mhm.
same thing goes for bosses, right?
Yep.
And leaders and speakers. I had an executive coach early on in my entrepreneurial journey who said, you know, coaches and consultants, like we're just shoveling our own shit. Like
Yep.
we are just teaching you the stuff that we have been through, we have learned,
Mhm.
we still struggle with on a daily basis. And I
Yep.
think sometimes that's missed by some of the big guru
Mhm.
influencers who like never have self-doubt and never have self-judgment and all these big
Yep.
things. But we're all human, right? And I think sometimes that is missed, and it's okay to be human and be a flawed person as long as we keep growing and changing.
Absolutely. And that, I think you mentioned a great example personally. It's how do you apply, and I don't know about you, but I've become I would hope a better person as well as a better husband, a better father through some of the life lessons, whether it was in business or even at home. And I volunteer, I do youth ministry, and I've learned so much from being like a volunteer youth minister person in my church and being able to help people grow and help them learn and help how to communicate. Like it's interesting. I work with high school teenagers, and 22 years ago when I started, you could have a conversation like this, John, no problem. Today they've got to pull out their phones and be on their phones, and they don't have a really good conversation. And I feel bad for the youth because they went through COVID, they got pulled out of schools, and there's a lot of emotional and psychological stuff that these young people are dealing with. And you talk about the different generations in the workplace. Unless we figure out how to correct that, it's coming into the workplace, and I've already seen some of it, but it's coming in. And then you add the AI technology and all the tech adoption that's happening, and it's going to compound, right? And then you got the baby boomers that are slowly retiring, and they don't want anything to do with technology, so it just causes all these issues.
Yeah, I like just quick little personal note. Like my wife is constantly jokes with me because like have my son get off his tablet after so long, right? And
Yeah,
she's like, "Yeah, get off your tablet so we can look at the big tablet, the TV." I'm like, "But to me, it is different. Like
yeah,
you are more together when you're sitting there
yeah.
watching a TV show. You're talking. You're not heads down doing this and
Mhm.
not." like there could be a fire he would know, right, when he's
Yeah.
on his tablet, right? There is a
Yep.
different focus component. I mean, we all need to get off our screens entirely more,
Yep.
right? But including the TV. But like I'm like I do see it as different when your head's down and doing something all by yourself for long periods of time. It creates that isolation and just that focus is there, but it's so focused you lose perspective of everything else.
That's right. 100%.
Well, well, let's wrap this up. So what's we've been talking about a lot from culture, leadership, operations. What is one piece of advice that you would give to leaders out there to help them make sure they're going the right direction, they're rowing, steering the boat the right direction, and bringing their team along with them?
I think pull your leadership team your next level down and ask them where you can improve and be willing to hear the answer, right? And be willing to give, like, let them give you feedback and take the criticism and figure out where maybe there's a theme or an area that you can improve. I think, again, sometimes as leaders, we have these egos and like we think we know it all. And I think that is an area for improvement in a lot of organizations. And I'll go back to what we permit is what we promote. So again, if we're ignoring a problem or we're not having the conversation with somebody and they continually show up late, but you've got other people that are not, those people that are not, or those high performers, they're going to say, oh, it's okay. They don't care about this. So that's going to be an allowed behavior. So I think those are like two areas that I would definitely encourage, leaders to go out and try to do, right? Ask the questions, be willing to hear the answers. Don't be defensive, like be willing to listen, to understand, and like do some reflection, right? Use the emotional intelligence stuff and figure out, like, is this something maybe I can improve? And then maybe take that same question and ask the people that you love, your family, your friends. Maybe they give you something like, have you been like the same person or have you changed? Because, people adapt, people change, they go through different life experiences, like you mentioned with personal stuff. And I think in different seasons of life, you're going to have different, experiences with people.
Yeah, yep, 100%. Well, Scott, we're going to share all your information in the show notes when this is launched. But go ahead and tell people the best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah, I mean, probably the website, so fortitudehrsolutions.com. There's an info at Fortitude email. And then you can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm happy to help in any way I can. And John, I've really enjoyed this conversation. A lot of value. And I think you and I are cut from the same cloth on a lot of things.
Yep. All right, Scott, I told you this is coming. My final question. Can you name a book or a quote that has helped change your life?
Man, this is tough because I know you prepped me ahead of time, and there's several that I have. So I'm going to tie it to two. Number one, again, just because I'm a faith-based person, the Bible's instilled a lot of principles in me, so that's the one book. And then the one that I've read over the last couple of years that I've found a lot of value in is The Energy Bus by John Gordon. Just mindset and how we treat people and like energy vampires. And I don't know about you, but I can go into a room with 150 people and I'm instantly fed. Like I will suck the energy and life out of people, not in a bad way, but like I feed off of that. My wife, on the other hand, is a little bit more introverted. Like that drains her, right? So like knowing that, but also understanding the team and what's important to each person. So those are the two books. And then quote, again, I go back to mine, like living up or living down to expectations based upon how we communicate and setting that proper tone.
Yep. Great. Scott, it's been a great conversation. Obviously, the title is Trust the Process. And a lot of the process that people need to trust is trusting themselves, trusting their teams, getting those often seen as softer elements of organization, the culture, the leadership, the mindset, but it really goes a long way in making sure that all the operational and strategic elements are in place and can be fulfilled by trusting yourself, trusting your team, and trusting the process, including the culture of the organization. So, Scott, it's been a great conversation, and everyone else, stay tuned for the next episode. And if you have not subscribed to the podcast, please do so now. Scott, thanks for having us.